In the nation's third primary, Democrats feel the burn. With Sanders smoking the field in Nevada, what next for those pursuing the presidency? Here at home, a powerful Texas congressman sounds the alarm over Democratic plans to roll back tax cuts. Will it matter to voters come November? And in the nation's capital, a troubling revelation that the Russians are back and trying to meddle in America's elections. I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, legendary reporter turned investigative media consultant Wayne Dolcefino. Next up, legal analyst and Houston attorney Carmen Roe. In the 3 spot, well-known columnist and businessman Bill King. Batting cleanup, senior Fox 26 legal and political analyst Chris Tritico. Next up, conservative lawyer and Second Amendment expert Michele Maples. And closing us out over there on the hot corner, writer, educator, and radio host Antonio Diaz. Let's begin. Nevada's Democrats have spoken, and Bernie Sanders is the clear winner of the nation's third presidential primary. And the self-proclaimed Democratic socialist is clearly feeling confident about the next big race.
Don't tell anybody. I don't want to get them nervous. We're going to win the Democratic primary in Texas.
The Vermont senator celebrating in San Antonio last night after leaving the rest of the Democrats eating Las Vegas dust. With Super Tuesday just 9 days away, who's looking strong, who's looking weak, and who needs a great showing Saturday in South Carolina to survive? Chris Tritico, I'm going to you. What do you think? Sanders surging?
Well, Bernie Sanders really, his policies, which I think will bankrupt the country if even one of them gets through, but he plays very well to the young population, and that's who's voting for him, that's who's backing him. But if you get a calculator out and add them up, those policies can't be supported by the economy of the United States. And the problem he has is just that. The Republicans came in and did an unfunded mandate with the tax cuts that they did, and it's costing the economy $1 trillion a year as we sit right now. That's unfunded. And they said that that the economy alone would pay for it. It's not. Bernie Sanders wants to spend about, I think you said, $70 trillion. We cannot pay for that. So what Bernie Sanders is doing is promising something that we cannot pay for. So if he wins the nomination, I fear that Donald Trump will be reelected, and people need to get a calculator out and rethink this.
Wayne, did I see a Sanders bumper sticker on your head? No, I did not.
But look, let me say something. Sanders is authentic. He said the same nonsense for 40 years, first of all, right? But look, this country, this was the election we should have had in 2016 if it wasn't stolen by the Democratic Party from Bernie. Because the reality is we have two competing things going on in this country. We have greed. Some folks simply have too much money, right? And they're taking advantage of folks. And then we have envy. Right? A lot of those people that support Bernie, I haven't paid taxes yet, and I'm not sure you should be able to vote if you don't have any skin in the game in the first place. I'm just saying. But I'm just being honest. But because they ain't paying for it. Their mommies and daddies are still paying for a lot of that stuff. And I'm sorry. I get it. But our universities are brainwashing these kids that there's some like free money god out there that's throwing stuff. It's ridiculous.
Okay. Tony, I saw you tweet yesterday, hey, look, Bernie's offering a minimum of $60K for every teacher in America. He's offering a lot more than that. Can you ride Bernie to the nomination and the presidency?
Well, first of all, I want to make it clear, I am against Wayne Dolcefino's proposal to roll back voting rights, first of all. Okay, let's get that straight. And I think what people are missing is that the folks who critique Bernie are also stunned that Biden is doing so poorly, and also think that Biden was a front runner to begin with. And simply, that's not the case. It's not theory anymore. You see it in the numbers. In fact, if he couldn't win Iowa, I think he's going to see his demise here in Texas. Having said that, the other thing is these young folks do read. In fact, they're the ones going to his website, which is inundated with funding and also supporters. So here's what's going to happen. Radical Bernie was proposing free college. Guess what? In Texas, community college is effectively free already if you attend dual credit programs in public schools. So really what's going on is that Bernie is appealing to a base of people that are smarter than the Build a Wall slogan, folks, and just as motivated. And I see we're going to see some serious changes for the Democratic Party and the American presidency.
Michele Maples, I've always said that women in the suburbs are the kingmakers or queen makers. Do you think Bernie Sanders scares them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you know what women in the suburbs do? They balance their checkbook. They watch their money. And if you just listen to one of Bernie Sanders' talking points, it takes no economist, it takes no accountant to figure out that we cannot afford this. What he is proposing is triple our GDP. The women in the suburbs can put 2 and 2 together, myself included, and I'm no math major, that's for sure, that we simply cannot afford this. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party is leaving the moderate base behind. And I think Tony was right when he said a lot of these moderates were banking on Biden. Then they swapped to Bloomberg, who then had a pretty poor showing last week, which we'll talk about next. But Sanders is going to have a tough row to hoe.
Bill, I read where Buttigieg, Warren, and Biden all have less than $6 million in the bank. You know, what's your read on what happened in Nevada?
It'll be interesting to see if there's some kind of a Stop Bernie movement that gets started, kind of like the Stop Trump movement back in 2016. I was with a Democratic businessman last night at an event, and I mean, he's given a lot of money to Democrats, and he said, look, I can't go with Sanders. I just can't do it. He'll destroy the economy. And so what is going to be interesting to me is what happens if Sanders gets a nomination. I agree. I think he loses to Trump. But if he doesn't get the nomination, then I can see the Democratic Party just splitting up into two wings. And, you know, maybe if we're confronted with a choice between Sanders and Trump, maybe finally moderates will start thinking about we need a third way.
Carmen, close us out on this.
You know, socialism has already got a campaign behind it where we're comparing it to communism. They're not that far apart. And a lot of what I think is true is that we haven't vetted Sanders, and that's going to start happening. We're going to start pulling out a pocketbook and saying, okay, how does all this really work? Right. And I think the young people in the country that are supporting Sanders just don't know what he's talking about and how it's going to work in this country.
Okay. What happens in Texas? You guys, anybody, does Sanders win Texas?
Bernie wins. It's going to be amazing when we see the delegates rain on him, and I think people need to wake up and see that everyone's going to be feeling the burn soon.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Up next, billionaire Michael Bloomberg battered and bruised on the debate stage.
We are not going to beat Donald Trump with a man who has who knows how many non-disclosure agreements and the drip, drip, drip of stories of women saying they have been harassed and discriminated against. That's not what we do as Democrats.
Will a release of those non-disclosures be enough to rebound by Super Tuesday? Stay with us. What's your point? We'll be right back. Welcome back. Literally every contender took a whack at the well-heeled new kid on the block, Michael Bloomberg, during last week's debate. And you knew it was coming. Stop and frisk, redlining, and allegations of brutal misogyny. Friday, Bloomberg announced that 3 former employees with non-disclosure agreements related to sexual harassment claims would be released to talk about their experiences. No question the billionaire former New York mayor took some serious blows, but was it enough to sour Super Tuesday voters desperate for a Democrat capable of taking down Trump? Carmen Roe, I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
You know, as his lawyer, I don't think it's a good idea to release all this information. I don't think it's going to help him. The truth is what we talked about, I think last week on the show, Bloomberg is another Trump. I think this is the tip of the iceberg regarding his behavior towards women and other people who don't have as much power as him. And so, you know, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think this is Pandora's box about to be opened up on him.
Michele Maples, what do you think of that?
I agree with Carmen that if I were Bloomberg's attorney, I would be horrified at releasing these records because we like our privacy, we like our secrecy, and we like to keep this wall. And Bloomberg has this wall of polish, or had this wall of polish prior to this was past week's debate. As we've seen with Trump's election, nobody cares. Nobody seems to care. It is an optic, but Trump got elected. And again, with this sort of issue with Bloomberg, it's a non-starter. Find something else to hound him on.
Chris, I got to believe Bloomberg had a star chamber of high-powered advisors telling him, you got to get out on this. Bad move, good move?
Well, it's the way he handled it. It's opposite of what Trump did. Trump attacks these people and beats them about the head and shoulders with it. And what Bloomberg did was trying to walk the line on it. And then what he said was a carefully crafted, I'm releasing these 3. He didn't say these are the only 3 that affect me. And that's the problem. And when it comes out that there's more that affect him, he's going to tank again. That's the problem.
Okay, lawyers, you guys supposedly say you don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. I mean, so I guess he figures he'll walk from this. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'll tell you, laying the legal issues aside, I was just stunned how poorly prepared he was for the debate. I mean, look, this guy can afford the best debate coaches in America, and he puts on that kind of performance. So, look, Mayor, if you need a debate coach, I'm available. Just give me a call.
Okay, Wayne, 20 seconds. Leave time for Tony.
So Bloomberg's not really a Democrat, and what he probably would have said if he was a Republican is, you know what, you got to have a sense of humor in life. Sometimes people say inappropriate things, right? I've never done it personally, but I know that it exists.
Not the last 5 minutes.
Okay, not since the show started. Okay? but that's the problem, right? Because everyone's a marshmallow on the left. They're marshmallows. They get offended by everything. That's the problem.
Okay, all offended by everything. 30 seconds.
Not offended by everything. I thought it was a great debate for Democrats. Warren showed she can throw a punch. Bloomberg showed he can take a punch. He didn't look great on stage, but what was brilliant is that we saw structural change in action because he did go back. He released the women from their non-disclosure agreements. Additionally, he said that at his workplaces, they will no longer tolerate the policy of non-disclosure agreements, which is very different than President Trump, who not only has doubled down on non-disclosure agreements, now he's holding all the Republican senators to the same sort of quality without the legal document. He's just bullying them into silence.
Woo, we got to leave it there. Still ahead. He's a top contender in the race to represent Congressional District 22. Democratic attorney Derrick Reed of Pearland is here to make his case and counter allegations. He's in our hot seat after the break. Welcome back. He's a former Harris County prosecutor and the first African American in Pearland's history to be elected to City Council. In 9 days, Derrick Reed hopes to take it up a major notch by becoming the choice of Democrats to represent Congressional District 22. Derrick Reed, welcome to the hot seat, man.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. As a prosecutor, you've sent criminals to prison. As a defense lawyer, you've saved clients from incarceration. You know the difference between career criminals and people who can be salvaged.
Most definitely.
How do we improve our justice system?
So one, we need to pay attention to victimless crimes, to those that have been convicted or charged with crimes like drug crimes, for instance. My mom was charged with many drug crimes throughout my childhood, went to state jail. I went to see her in state jail. We need to focus on recidivism, reducing the recidivism rate, and stop private prisons from continuing to make money off of tax dollars put forth by every American citizen. They're like Walmart in a sense. They want you to keep coming back. And so we also need to pay closer attention to sentencing guidelines. We seem to be locking up more black and brown people for lesser crimes, but for longer time. And so we definitely have to pay attention to those types of things. Right now, President Trump put forth a First Step Act, which is more of a prison reform as opposed to criminal justice reform. And so we need to make modifications to that.
Derrick, your top priority is making health care more available and more affordable. How do we get there?
I mean, first day when I get to Congress is to focus on not going back and forth, but to making sure that people have health care. People need health care now. They don't need it yesterday. They don't need it tomorrow. They don't need it 10 years from now. They need it now. They need it today. There's been, talk of Medicare for all. I'm not a Medicare for all person. I'm definitely a public option person. That's something that can get done immediately. That's something that can get done in the 2 years that I have. I'm not guaranteed re-election. And so, I want to make sure that people have access to health care. I didn't have health care until I was 19 years old, which is, it's pretty far down the line. And so, I definitely feel the pressures. I know the pressures of not having health care, and I know what it's like.
Look, CD22 is incredibly diverse. You have said if America is the only country someone has ever known, they're American. I assume you're talking about dreamers.
Most definitely.
So what would you do? Would you make work towards a path for dreamers?
I'd make sure that dreamers we're not forgotten. I make sure that dreamers have a path to citizenship. That act was put in place in the early 2000s. I think it was 2001. It needs to continue on. It needs to be improved. People that come into this country, youth that come into this country, need to have a clear pathway to citizenship, and so definitely would be in favor of that.
Okay, national Democrats like Sanders and Warren are calling for some huge increases in federal spending to solve what they see as inequities. You, on the other hand, have called for a middle-class tax cut and a ceiling on federal debt. Does that make you a moderate? And tell me in about 20 seconds, because I've got another question for you.
I most definitely am a moderate. If you look at my record on city council, I've always voted for moderate tax solutions to our citizens, and so I definitely am a moderate when it comes to that. I'm a business owner. I have employees, and so I know what it means to be hit hard with taxes.
Derrick Reed, on Super Tuesday, you faced Democrat Sheree Kulkarni and Nyanza Moore, who you feel like made some unsubstantiated allegations against you. Why are you the best choice?
So real quick about the allegations. The allegations that she made were completely false. I've never hit any woman, never committed domestic violence against my ex-wife or any woman for that matter. I filed the lawsuit just for that, to protect my family and to protect my reputation. I'm the best candidate because I am that district. I'm the lower class, or I'm the lower income folks. I've experienced that. I've lived that life. I'm the business owner. I'm the parent, the single parent actually, with children in school. I actually have a record of voting. I have a record of voting and record of serving the citizens of Pearland. I've been elected in that district, and so I know how to serve the citizens of that district.
Derrick Reed, thanks for taking the hot seat, man.
Thank you.
Hope to have you back.
Thanks.
Okay, up next, a return to the national stage and the Trump tax cuts. Every single Democrat vying for president says they have to go. But are a majority of American voters willing to give them back? Stay with us. Watch Your Point continues in just a moment. Welcome back. While the Democratic contenders have found plenty of ground for disagreement, there is clear-cut consensus on one critical topic. That is, whichever progressive prevails, Americans can expect that nominee will call for a reversal of the Trump tax cut and new potentially heavy levies on the rich.
We have a grotesque and immoral distribution of wealth and income.
That's something a majority of Americans support, a 2-cent wealth tax. It is a question of values.
The idea that we have a tax rate for corporate America at 21% is ridiculous. It should be at 28%.
That the rich aren't paying their fair share. We should raise taxes on the rich.
Okay, the author of those tax cuts, former House Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady of the Woodlands, is issuing a warning to voters here and across the country.
You can't build up the poor by tearing down those who create jobs, come up with new discoveries, find those new cures, create those new businesses. That's how we find those jobs, where we lift people out of poverty.
Just how big a role will the kitchen table issue of tax policy play come November? I'm going straight to Bill King on this.
So I've studied this issue extensively about exactly where taxes ought to be raised in terms of how much you make. And after I've run all my models, I figured out it's about $10,000 a year more than I make is exactly where you ought to be. Now, look, this is, trying to define who the rich are. Let's go tax the rich. The truth is, you can't deal with our financial problems in the United States by taxing one group. The number's too big. It's $1 trillion a year that we're short right now. Now, there were some things in the tax cuts I liked. There were some things I didn't like. There's some ridiculous loopholes like the carried interest that need to be eliminated. But if you want to know where the real money is, it's in the black market economy that's not taxed at all. We need to figure out how to tax that, and that would come close to closing the gap.
What do you think of that, Chris?
Well, I do like that idea about the black market economy. But look, the tax cut that's currently in place that Kevin Brady authored is I think is hurting the country. And if they're going to leave that in place, what needs to happen is corporations should be required to take that money, instead of reinvesting and buying their own stock back and giving that money back to their shareholders. They need to be forced to use that money to actually create jobs and put that money into infrastructure. That's a better use of the money than just putting it back into the corporation and propping up their bottom line.
Maples, I'm going to guess you completely disagree.
What? No. All right, well, let's just look at the economy. Unemployment is sitting around the 3.5%. Who is benefiting the most from this economy? It's blue-collar workers. On a percentage basis, those are the individuals who are seeing pay raises. And then also, I don't know if I've talked about it before, but my family has a small little pipeline business. And what happens when that company is able to save money? They give their employees bonuses. They raise salaries. They are able to hire more welders, more pipeliners. The money goes back into back to the people, basically.
Okay. Tony, are you saying sock it to the rich? They've been on the government dole for too
I wouldn't
long?
put it that way, but we have to admit, right now, there's a glow in the economy that's due to Donald Trump basically taking a big credit card out, right? So we're basically in debt more than we've ever been. We're living on credit cards right now. And what Texas Republicans have to do is they either stay in line with that belief or they come back and put Texas first and think about what's going to help Texas families. And let's get something straight. These new jobs, 40% are under $40,000 a year. And that doesn't cut it for most families. Even University of Houston downtown, if you make $50,000 a year, your kid goes free because we know families are struggling. So get it straight, Texas Republicans, and help Texas families first.
Wayne, 30 seconds. Save time for Carmen.
Oh, so we're living on a credit card, Tony, because we're paying for a lot of people's decisions, poor decisions, having kids they can't afford, right? No, it's true, Tony. We pay a lot of money in this country to make up for people's irresponsibility. We just do. And so you could say all day long that we have to change things, but we have to get a sense of responsibility in this country along with making everyone pay a flat
Responsible
tax.
parents are working 2 and 3 jobs to survive.
Tony,
they don't have insurance.
I'm not talking about those folks, and you know it.
No, I don't know that.
The corporate rate is 21%, but most corporations are paying the biggest corporations are paying 0. If everyone had to pay some percent, 8, 10, 15, whatever it is, we'd all get along
public
fine.
school charity? Is that what it is? You're calling public school charity?
Tony, really?
Sure, we're going to talk about this again. Up next, he's smart, he's rich, and he's running for president. Our one-on-one conversation with Democrat Tom Styer is still to come. Among the Democratic contenders looking to elevate on Super Tuesday here in Texas is billionaire Tom Styer of California. We spoke in depth about the case he's making to voters in the Lone Star State.
And my statement is, if you want to be a Democrat, you've got to be able to attract Democratic voters and inspire Democrats. And that means black people, it means Latinos, it means Asian Americans, as well as white people. And I believe that that's a message that I have been working. I've been on the ground here in Nevada and South Carolina more than any other candidate. I believe I am putting together that kind of coalition. I think the numbers show it in Nevada, where I'm in 2nd or 3rd place and going up, and in South Carolina, where I'm in 2nd or 3rd place and going up. And people are going to be able to see that actually there's somebody who can pull together the Democratic Party. There's someone who can beat Mr. Trump on the economy. He stinks on the economy, as far as I'm concerned. He stinks on the economy for working people. And what I'm talking about economically actually makes American progress and American prosperity go to everybody. So there's somebody here who's a real Democrat and who can pull people together.
Tom Styer, reversing climate change has been a core component of your campaign from the very beginning. How do you sell a rapid reduction in fossil fuel use and production in the Lone Star State, where so much of the economy is intrinsically linked to fossil fuel production?
Actually, the funny thing, Greg, is we're going to have to rebuild the United States, including Texas. And we're going to have to, that's going to create literally millions of good paying union jobs, over 4.5 million. This is going to be the biggest union job program in the history of the United States. So the two things I can say are it's going to be a huge job program. We're going to grow much faster. They're going to be much higher wages. And we're going to make sure that any worker in a declining industry, a fossil fuel industry, is held harmless in terms of wages, healthcare, and retirement. We've put that money aside from the beginning. We are not going to solve this on the back of working people in fossil fuel industries, but it is going to be an incredible boost to the American economy and to working people. We're going to give a 10% tax cut to every American who makes less than $250,000. We're going to go back to taxing rich people higher than we tax working people, which would be a great change. And we're going to move up the minimum wage, because the minimum wage at $7.25 is an insult to working people. We're going to go back to an economy that's aimed for the people of the United States, not just rich people who go to the Mar-a-Lago Country Club. We're going to have a different kind of economy that grows faster and where people get rewarded for their work.
Hey, you have a strong awareness of the complex relationship states like Texas and California have with our neighbors to the south. Many of your Democratic opponents have proposed what people here see as all comers are welcome type policies. Do you see things differently, and is there a feasible middle ground?
Look, I think it's the responsibility of a country to control its borders, Greg, absolutely. But I think what Mr. Trump has been doing on immigration has been a pretext for racism. What they've been doing to people coming to seek asylum is not only against international law, it's really breaking the laws of humanity. He's been torturing kids. It's just not right. But the real question we have to get back to is, we can control our borders, but we have to stop pretending that somehow people who want to come here are bad. That's not true. You know, people have been coming here running away from persecution and violence and seeking a better life so they can work hard and have their family succeed for hundreds of years. I don't know when the idea came that immigrants coming here to work hard is a bad thing. We can control our borders, but we have to go back to the idea of like, that is a positive for America, that we attract the best and the brightest and the hardest working. And we've got, you know, from California, you're from Texas. There are 12 million people who've lived here an average of 15 years without papers, without documentation. And I do exactly what Ronald Reagan did. I do comprehensive immigration reform, give them legal status, give them a path to citizenship for sure. What Mr. Trump is doing is he's saying, it's not that he doesn't want immigrants, he doesn't want non-white immigrants. And that's just wrong.
Still ahead, a city where it appears crime does actually pay. A bail reform horror story straight from the Big Apple. Our panel is set to unload when we come back. Welcome back. A story from New York of particular interest here in Harris County. You see, the Big Apple is immersed in its own controversial version of criminal bail reform. Enter one Charles Berry, a 56-year-old self-described career criminal who's been arrested 139 times. After being caught ripping off subway riders, Berry yelled at reporters, and I quote, "Bail reform is legit. It's the Democrats. They know me, and the Republicans fear me. You can't touch me. I can't be stopped. It's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing," end quote. It was the sixth time Berry was taken into custody this year. After each arrest, he was released pending trial without bond. His lawyers with legal aid say critics are exploiting the case as a, quote, scare tactic when they should be supporting social services and treatment. Let's go to Carmen Roe. Can't wait to hear.
We don't put people in jail that we are mad at. We put people we're afraid of in jail. This is a situation where this gentleman's clearly homeless. He probably has mental health issues, and we keep putting homeless people in jail, and we keep putting mental health people in jail because we have nowhere else to put them, and they're an inconvenience in our society. I mean, some of these charges have been him jumping over and not paying to get onto these trains. And so it's a situation where the pendulum has swung without question too far to the left on bail reform. Clearly there, always here. We need to come back to something that's reasonable. Bail is meant to ensure the safety of the community and make sure people go to court. That's it. It cannot be used as an oppressive tool the way they want to use it for a gentleman who we're frustrated at over 139 arrests. Why don't we start looking into getting him some services and getting him out of the train stations?
Okay, Wayne, I suspect you have a different point of view.
Well, look, I love Carmen. She's partly right, okay? But he's obviously not that crazy. He's not that crazy because he's right? The Democrats are leading us down a path. Bail reform in this town, forget New York, they got their own problems. Bail reform in this town is killing people. Rodney Ellis and the judges, and the DA to a certain degree, sold us a bill of goods. It was going to be these, poor people make minor mistakes, let's give them a break, not keep them in jail because they're poor. There are rapists, child molesters, felons with guns getting out on PR bonds all the time, and they're killing people, and it's going to be the seminal issue in this campaign this year in this town. New York, they got all their freak shows they need.
Chris Tritico spends a little time at the courthouse. What's your read?
I love Wayne, but he's mostly wrong. The problem we have here in this town with bail reform is that the Republicans who were in office for 20 years used an oppressive system and violated the 8th Amendment of literally thousands and thousands of defendants and held them in jail on cases that they should have been released on. And they used the bail system to hold misdemeanor defendants in jail to force them to plead guilty to cases that they shouldn't have been pleading guilty on. That resulted in a civil rights lawsuit against Harris County. The bail reform that we have now is a result of a civil rights lawsuit, not a result of Democrats getting elected. Now, the case was settled after the Democrats took office because the Republicans spent $6 million litigating a case all the way to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. But this is a result of Republican politics, not a result of Democrats getting elected.
Gotta let Tony talk, because there is a fear that criminal justice reform has swung too far to the left, and there are collateral damage that's real out there.
Well, let's see, brazenly breaking the law, flaunting it, and then doing it again and again. I don't want to talk about Donald Trump again, but that sounds like Donald Trump. I will say this, before we import bad examples from other cities, let's get it straight then. They have a Democratic legislature there that can look at this and say, is it a policy? Is it a law? We've heard both sides of that right now. And what I like then is, well, then let's take this outlier and address it profoundly, which is what happens when you elect people who then want to create fair cases. Obviously, this is wrong. The question becomes, how do we fix it, and fix it in a profound way so that we don't make the same mistakes again?
Yeah. Okay, Bill, 30 seconds.
So I think Carmen really nailed a couple of points. One is this whole mental health issue. Back in the 50s and 60s, we decided to stop forcing people to go into institutions. And what we did was we put them on the streets and in jail, and that's not working. We cannot deal with mental health in the criminal justice system. But I will tell you, just out in talking to people in the community, I hear more discussion about criminals being released today than just about any other topic. And let me throw in one other thing. I don't agree with you that this is OG. I think this is the judges, because Kim has consistently pushed for higher bail, and it's the judges that are not setting the bail.
Okay, we got to leave it right there. Up next, a trio of head-shaking developments. We're bundling into a segment called Say It Ain't So. The reaction is certain to be lively, so stay with us. Welcome back. This week we have a segment I'm calling Say It Ain't So. First up, the venerable Boy Scouts of America, forced to seek bankruptcy protection, succumbing to an onslaught of lawsuits from former members sexually abused as children by predatory adults within the organization. Next, former Major League ball player Aubrey Huff back in the news after he was disinvited from a championship reunion celebrating the 2011 San Francisco Giants. Huff believes the Giant organization told him he was unwelcome because of his outspoken support of President Trump. The Giants say it's not Huff's politics, but rather his misogyny, vulgarity, and lack of decency. Finally, female athletes are protesting the domination of track and field competitions by young women still in transition from once being young men. Those objecting include 3 girls in Connecticut who are suing, saying that the trans athletes have an undeniable physiological advantage that represents a fundamental unfairness to their competitors who have remained biologically female from birth. Panel, take your pick. What's your point? Michele Maples? Crazy stuff, huh?
This is wild. Say it ain't so. So I'm going to take Aubrey Huff first. I would like to remind everybody that the CEO of the San Francisco Giants was on video pushing his wife to the ground. He got an invite, but why didn't Aubrey Huff?
Wow, that's crazy. Carmen Roe.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Now I'm interested more in Huff. Boy Scouts, oh my goodness, these people. So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of potential victims out there who are probably never going to see any sort of relief in the way of financial or other sort of response because they're declaring bankruptcy and kind of sealing everything up. So I think it's a tragedy that they're able to do this, and a lot of the victims out there will never be heard from, and we won't know how huge this situation is, except that we know back in the 40s they were first getting notification at the leadership level that there were problems like this inside the Boy Scouts.
So I saw this, and I've got lawyers everywhere here, but the assets actually were much greater than the liabilities. Are they worried about the projected liabilities?
Well, that's what bankruptcy's for, and that doesn't mean that nobody will get anything. If they have assets that the bankruptcy court can then dole out to the victims, then it'll go through the bankruptcy court. But that may end up being the end of the Boy Scouts.
Okay, Chris, I didn't want to cut you short on which topic do you like?
The transgender lawsuit. This has been coming, and because if you're a male and you can't compete as a male, it is unfair then to. And I'm a big fan of transgender rights, so I don't want this to be taken as pejorative. But you can't just slap a wig on and say, "Now I'm gonna go compete on the girls' side." And this needs to be regulated, and it needs to be done in a fashion so that if you're going to transgender, it needs to be done in a way that you are now competing as a woman, and you have transgendered to a woman.
Okay, where do you see this going?
Well, the lawsuit needs to be done in a fashion so that states are now going to regulate this in a fashion so that it's done at a competitive level so that girls are competing as girls.
Okay, hold it right there. We'll continue this discussion on the other side of this break. Welcome back as we continue our discussion of Boy Scout bankruptcy, the blackballing of a Trump-supporting ball player, and the protest over trans athletes dominating women's sports. Wayne, what's your point?
I'll take two real quick. So the Huff thing, look, the people that are being bullied and are silent now about being for Trump's policies, if not for the guy himself, we will speak in November, okay? Look, I don't want to be rude and inappropriate because that's not really my thing. but can I tell you something? You are born a dude or a girl, okay? I get it. Some people have hormonal things that make them want to do something else. You want to change, fine, but there are consequences to that, right? And one of them is that you can't compete against other girls anymore. I'm sorry, right? But you could do anything you want. I don't get the whole gender fluid thing. I just don't. I'm sorry, right? You're a boy, you're a girl, you want to switch. God bless you. Have a good time.
Okay, trio of topics, Tony. Which one do you like?
I got to talk about Huff's cliches because he's in a huff about supposedly being politically correct or not. He needs to take off his former jersey and read that he played for the San Francisco Giants, who represent San Francisco, California. California is not only the most liberal state in the union, San Francisco is probably the most liberal state in California. Having said that, I got no sympathy for him because I'm sure his playmates can't stand him because he's obnoxious and simple. And worse, we're sitting here in Houston, Texas. I'm worried more about my Astros. So he needs to be thankful that they're not asking him to give his World Series ring back, and he needs to sit down and let real problems come to the head of the table.
Okay, Bill King, come on down to the muck with the rest of us.
Come on, Bill.
Do any of these topics interest you? Any thoughts?
So Tom Steyer's energy policy. Now, the only thing I'd say is about Huff. I think that we've gotten into this. I went and looked at Huff's feed after. It is awful. I mean, it is absolutely awful. Yeah. And I'm getting a little tired of people saying, I can go out and say all these things, and then I'm going to blame it on me being a Trump supporter. He wasn't kicked out. He's a jerk. That's why they didn't want him at the party.
Okay. Carmen, anything else?
I agree. He's a jerk.
Okay. but do jerks have First Amendment rights?
But it's a
private. I'm going to go to Chris.
You have a right to be all the jerk you can be. But when you choose to exercise that right, I have the right to disinvite you to my party.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Still to come, cyber help from the Russians, the unwanted kind. This time in support of Social Democrat Bernie Sanders. We aim to work through the fallout, so stick around. Welcome back. U.S. intelligence officials informed Bernie Sanders this week that the Russians were actively working in cyberspace to help his campaign. What do we make of this, Wayne? Could there be a Russian behind every tree? Actually?
There is. Look, if I was advising the Russians, I would say, you're doing a great job. First of all, the Democrats blamed the 2016 election, right? They lost because Hillary Clinton sucked as a candidate, right? That's why they lost. The Russians, other than hacking emails that prove that she was the witch that we all thought she was, right? What do they do? Facebook, Tony. They do Twitter. Who cares, right? If people are that stupid that they can't actually educate themselves, they deserve it. The Russians are playing us, and everybody's falling for it.
Go, Tony.
Well, you can listen to that, or the CIA, the FBI, the intelligence agencies, you know. And this is another example of Trump mismanaging a major deal, because he had 4 years to fix this. And he didn't, because he was scared that it would show that he wasn't legitimately elected, which he wasn't, because he lost the popular vote. So he should have fixed this. And right now, I think what's going to happen is we really all have to, as Americans, come together and make sure this stops. The House has actually put a bill forward to address this. Democrats are doing something about it. Trump has not.
Okay, Michele Maples, look, I mean, you can see where the Russians wouldn't mind Trump running against Sanders.
I think we need to open up a year-long investigation into the Sanders campaign and see that he is, in fact, working with the Russians because he honeymooned in Moscow. He is a Russian spy. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
Chris Tritico, you got a serious look on your face.
So, look, Donald Trump was legitimately elected. He won the race, okay? Let's get past all that. But after the election, Congress dedicated, as I recall, $400 million or more than that, to put infrastructure together to stop the Russians from infiltrating our election. Donald Trump spent zero putting that infrastructure together because he likes the help. And that's wrong, okay? We should do something to prevent this from happening again, and we didn't, and that's the problem.
Bill, you have any input here?
Well, I'm not surprised with helping Sanders. That's the one person I think Trump can actually beat of the Democratic field. So I think that's why they're helping him.
Okay, Carmen, last word.
I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think this was a story that was made up to take down Sanders. I mean, if you read through the material, there's no source, there's no evidence behind any of this supposed Russian alliance, except to remind you that Russians are communists. They're proponents for socialism, just like Bernie Sanders, and I think this is part of the takedown.
Okay, just for the record, Bernie said, I don't want your help, but we'll be following it.
Sure we do.
Okay, the conversation of all things political continues with a national focus on Fox News Sunday with host Chris Wallace. From all of us here, have a great week.